I'm Rory Williamson from Williamson & Co Real Estate, and I absolutely love living in this unique part of the world. And when you mention Noosa or the Sunshine Coast, people instantly think of the gorgeous beaches, the laid-back lifestyle and the near-perfect weather. But what makes a place really special are the people that live there. One of the perks of my job is I get to meet people every day, and everyone has a story. Come and join me as we meet some of the most interesting characters of the coast. Kristin and David, you've been up on the Sunshine Coast for 25 years now. You were the co-founders of the Noosa Long Weekend, now known as the Noosa Alive Festival. You've had great careers. Kristin's a novelist and a journalist. David is a screenwriter and a playwright. You've penned films like Don's Party, Gallipoli, The Year of Living Dangerously. What was it like when you made the decision to leave Sydney? Did you look at plenty of options, or was Noosa always going to be the one?
Well, I think we were very fond of Byron Bay for a while. It was probably Noosa or Byron. And we went and looked at Byron and thought, yes, very beautiful. A few sharks around though. And we had a lot of friends there, and we were from Sydney, so it seemed logical. But then we found Noosa, where we'd been coming for holidays for years, and I've always loved Noosa, the national park. And I think David preferred the restaurants here.
Look, yeah, this is a sophisticated place. It's got terrific infrastructure. It's got beautiful. I think Byron and Noosa are scenically wonderful. Noosa's got the big long beach here, the front beach, the river, and it's got the restaurants. And yeah, I was a bit more inclined to come to Noosa. Kristin was a bit more inclined to go to Byron. It's one of the few times I won. Yeah.
The Noosa Long Weekend Festival, what was the motivation behind that, and who helped you get it going?
Well, Brett Dean, he was the main one. He is a violist and a conductor. He came back from Germany and he came to live here. He'd been a Queenslander before, and he brought his family back, and we would often have dinner together. And one day he said, we should give something back to Noosa. And we said, yes, what? Arts Festival. We've got a lot of mates, why don't we just invite them? They won't get paid. Tell them to come, and they'll have accommodation for a few days, and they've got to perform for nothing. And so that's basically how it started.
I think there are a few other people too. I think you've got to give credit. Michael Gloucester was pushing it hard. Leonie Palmer was pushing it hard, and Ros and Rick McCauley virtually opened their place to become the ticketing house. The first year everything was voluntary, and we had to do it all ourselves. Their kitchen table was the ticket office. Yeah, they were great. So there was a handful, there were 6 of us, I guess, who did it in the end. We all had to put in $2,000 each to kick it off, pay the airfares, and that was the budget. It just struck us that this town was a wonderful magnet for top artists. They love coming here, so why not exploit that and make a great multi-arts festival. It's not a music festival. It's not a whole newt festival. It's not a specific thing. It just gives a bit of wide coverage.
Yeah. It's been going for about 18 years now, I believe. What were some of the most memorable acts or people that came to Noosa Long Weekend?
In the early days?
Well, I think John Pilger, the very left-wing journalist who finds a lot of fault with capitalism, and he came. But there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people in this town who think capitalism was very good. So there was a fair bit of tension. There were some sections of the crowd saying, well, we're going to run him out of town. Nobody will come. But in fact, he filled the hall. He could have done it twice over.
And people lined up, queued up to buy his book. So he won them. He's pretty smart.
David, I believe you've written more plays than Shakespeare. Is there a play or a film that you've done that you are particularly proud of?
Look, yeah, there's an A list and a B list. B list, I could have done better. I'm not ashamed of anything I've written, but some are better than others. They always are. And I think I'm glad I was involved with the 2 early Peter Weir films, Gallipoli and The Year of Living Dangerously. I think Travelling North was a lovely film. Some of the plays I've Emerald City, The Removalists, Dead White Males, and Don's Party. There are ones that come back quite often, and I'm very fond of seeing them in their new guise.
They say behind every great man there is an even greater woman. Do you think you would have got where you are today without Kristin by your side?
No, on two levels. First of all, she's the first one that reads my drafts of my plays or film scripts and gives me a very honest assessment. If more tactful these days than the early days, she's learned to be a little bit more tactful.
Yes.
But I know I get really good feedback from her on that level. And also, whenever I'm thinking of a strong, intelligent, witty woman to base a character on, Kristin said, if there's one more character in your plays, that a woman whose name starts with K, I'm divorcing you. So yes, on a couple of levels, she's been vital to my career.
And Kristin, how do you know when you're reading this first draft if it's a good one or a bad one?
It's fairly just emotional. I think you read it and think, is this going to grab the audience? You put yourself in the audience position. I often have pretty strong reactions if I don't like the play, and I just not long ago did have such a reaction to a play, and it was altered hugely, and it was a big success.
Yeah, I got the warning signs that one of my characters was so unlikable, no one would come, and I took the warning signs and totally rewrote it, and it turned out to be one of my biggest hits. So without Kristin, I wouldn't have had so many hits.
Well, it doesn't always take it easily, though, do you?
Oh, it took a while, but I do listen.
I have become more tactful, you have to admit.
Yes.
I used to just say, oh! But no,
Yes. Kristin, you're a creative person yourself, but what is it like living with a writer like David?
Well, it's good. It's wonderful in one way except we don't get fed because we're both working away obsessively. And I remember his plaintive voice coming from downstairs about 4 p.m. one day. Are we having lunch today? And of course not, because I was working and he was working. It was pretty disastrous, you may remember, when we had children. Poor little things. They grew up neglected, I'm sure. But they coped. But I think it probably wasn't ideal when having a lot of children. We had 5 at one point, and but they learned to look after each other. I think they did. They had to.
I was brought up in the era when boys at school did woodwork and metalwork and the girls learned cookery. And I was never any good and still am not any good in the kitchen. But one good thing about that is all our male sons, of which there are dozens, 4, all became, they saw how hopeless it was that Dad was hopeless, and they became very good cooks.
Yeah, it's quite true. Even our daughter's not bad.
Is it true that you went away, Kristin, and gave David instructions to barbecue the chops and boil the peas, and then he actually boiled the chops and barbecued the...
That's a little bit apocryphal.
Enhanced by the children over the decades.
Yes.
But it was a pretty disastrous.
The meat was overcooked and the vegetables undercooked. I'll go that far, yeah.
You've been together almost 50 years now, and Kristin, you actually wrote the biography, David's biography. In that biography, you openly discussed the ups and downs of your relationship, you could say. It was well documented. But you've managed to keep things together over the years, and you're still together today. What's the secret to a long and successful relationship?
Oh, well, they did a very big study in the States that looked at long-lived marriages, and the biggest factor by far was the husband did what they were told. No, it's true. That was the only big factor that came out.
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of a sense of humour helps. Forgiveness, you have to be able to forgive. Writing that book was quite therapeutic for me, actually.
Well, it was not quite so therapeutic for me.
What was discussed in the book? What were some of the issues?
I had a few stumbles along the way, which were detailed in great detail.
Oh, no, they were passed off as youthful stupidity.
Yeah.
But it was. I wasn't going to put so much in that book. But then my editor said, "Look, it's your story too. Put your side of it." And I started to. And I don't know, anyway, it developed. But a lot of people have contacted us since that book and said, look, I'm so glad you said this about your relationship, which always looks from the outside to be so calm and perfect and serene, because we feel better about our mistakes now.
Yeah, I got a few guys phoned up and said, "Oh, I felt a lot better after reading your book because I was caught out in this, and I was
long time ago."
Yeah.
Kristin, you've written multiple novels, a TV series, been a journalist at the National Times. Is there something in your career that stands out as a bit of a highlight for you?
I think the years at the National Times, when it was a really great investigative newspaper, which there are almost none now, were a highlight in my career. It was 8 years I worked there as, first of all, an arts journalist, then a part of a team of investigative journalists, including terrific people like Brian Toohey and David Marr, Wendy Bacon. It was a great time to be working in journalism. And I look back on that with great fondness and pride. To be part of that team was something.
Kristin would come home from work and say, I got a bunch of flowers delivered to the office today, and inside there was a bullet with So it was a little bit worrying for me when she was doing that journalistic stint.
David, I believe you were crash tackled by Mel Gibson on the set of Gallipoli multiple times. What happened that day?
Well, I'd written a script of Gallipoli, and in it there was a Victorian and West Australian regiment, so the game they had to be playing in Egypt was Australian rules. Peter Weir knew nothing about Australian rules and said, OK, I'll get a group of extras along and you teach them the rules. So we had Swedes, we had anyone that could vaguely look Australian was recruited, and I had to teach them Australian rules in one morning. Luckily we had one good A-grade player, and I had to be the ruckman because there was no one else tall enough there, so I had to get belted 8 takes. The script required the ruckman to get nobbled by Mel Gibson. I was pretty sore and sorry at the end of that day.
I think Mel enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Was there a bit of tension between you and Peter Weir that day, Dad?
Well, yes, he thought I could have organised it better and quicker, and he thought we should be playing rugby. And I said, no, they're Victorians and they're West Australians. They wouldn't be playing rugby. At any rate, I got that one through.
Kristin, you've raised 5 kids, you've had a career. What advice would you give to women who are striving to have a career and a family?
Well, I think don't give up. That's the first thing, because there are certainly moments when you think it's just not worth it. Something's got to go. And even my mother said to me, you either have a family or a career, you don't have both. And I remember thinking, yes, I am going to have both. But I think the children were terrific. They were quite strong and independent. And I don't think any of them suffered too much. But you must, I don't know, it's just you've got to keep going. And there are times when you have to step back just a little bit, like if the children are ill, that's a terrible time. And you've got a deadline to meet, and everybody else in the team is pulling their weight. You have to get there somehow. Many late nights, I don't know, but we did have a wonderful place to escape to, and we had a cottage at Pearl Beach, and we used to go there only once a fortnight. It was about an hour and a half drive. We put the dog, the kids, everyone in this old station wagon. About 7:30 at night we'd get away, just drive, and when we get there we'd be sane by the morning. So you needed an escape, to have a little escape, and not to give up.
But I think Kristin was always a terrific parent, but she used to beat herself up about missing a school concert or being late for a teacher interview at school, or because she was so busy at work, and she used to have nightmares for years afterwards about
juggling nightmares, about juggling unmarked papers when I was a teacher, this was, and a pile of unwashed nappies. Terrible nightmares. I haven't had them lately, though.
Yes, I'm out of nappies now, thank God. David, one of your plays, Up for Grabs, it was done on the West End in London and it had Madonna as the lead. What was it like working with Madonna? How did that production actually happen?
Well, it was a big hit in Australia, and my agent showed it around in London, and they thought, oh, this lead role of an art dealer, a female art dealer, who is pretty fast and loose with the way she sells her art, would appeal. And they sent it to Madonna, and she loved it, and she said, yes, I'll do it. And she hadn't been on stage for 10 or 15 years, so it was a big deal. But then Madonna likes to take control of things, and I was summoned to London. I had to spend a week in the rehearsal room with Madonna as she ordered me to rewrite the script. And it was very interesting because the Australian version, the Australian girl gets away with it in the end, and
the audience loves it.
The audience loves it. But Madonna said, being American, said, "Oh no, you can't get away with it, evil. I've got to suffer for my sins." So I had to rewrite the end and make her suffer. But look, it was a sold-out show. Nobody knew who wrote the play. They all came to see Madonna, and
she wasn't that good.
Well, look, she
tried. She did.
Yeah, she just wasn't used to a huge theatre. I mean, there's no amplification there, and so the director had to take her through some basic skills. She was all right in the end, I thought. Yeah.
And the other actors were wonderfully supportive. They were top actors, and they were very kind to her. So she survived quite well.
I believe it's going to happen again. This product, it hasn't been done since.
No. It's certainly a play that divides audiences. Put it that way. It's fairly explicit in the way she goes about selling her art as not the recommended way.
Yeah, and we'll be able to see it next year at Noosa Arts.
Yeah, we will, with a bright young director doing it, I believe, and a top cast. Yeah.
Kristin, you're always the first to read Dad's work, and you give notes for the next draft. How do you know if it's going to be a good one or a bad one?
Well, I know. As soon as she finishes, I wait anxiously, and she comes out of the office. If she's got tears in her eyes, I know it's going to be a hit, because she's proud of me. If she hasn't got tears in her eyes and a slightly worried frown, I know there's a lot of rewriting coming.
Yes.
Is that when tears start coming down your eyes, Dad?
I say, oh no.
Poor thing, he has to rewrite. Yeah, that's true.
What's one of your favourite memories together over the last 50 years?
Ooh. Wow.
Oh, look, I think those, for all their fraughtness, those trips with all the children and the dog to Pearl Beach were a highlight. It was a time when the family was all together, and it was, like Kristin and I are both family people. Kristin spends half her life keeping the family albums up to date, and so those moments when we have all the family together are a standout in our lives, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, the family things. And now the family's grown with grandchildren. It's huge. I mean, there are 14 grandchildren, and this is from a daughter, actually, who said, "No, I'm never going to get married. No, I'm going to have a career." Well, and everyone did. All our children have their own. And this is really something. We really love it. We have last Christmas a great big Christmas with 25 of us.
25 there, yes.
Partners and grandchildren, and that was special. But
and
I don't think
32 actually.
32, yes, 30. Oh,
It was at my place.
No, you had the
yes,
overflow.
yes,
You
yes.
bought, yeah.
Oh,
But,
that's right. But once a year we try and get the extended family all together. And that's a great time too. We've had some trips to Bali with the family, and we're going to go to Fiji next year, I think. Yeah.
When was the first time you came to Noosa? Was it a strong memory for you?
Yes, we drove up here
yes.
from Melbourne, I think, in a Volkswagen, and we had, it was in the early 70s, and we had 2 kids in the car, and we stopped at a very cheap place. We hoped to get a caravan park, but there was no room in the caravan park. We couldn't believe it. Thought, this place is very popular. And then we just thought it was so beautiful. We loved the feel of the national park was here then, and one little road down the centre, which was Hastings Street, not even made.
And it wasn't a culinary centre of the world at that time. It was there was one sophisticated, we thought it was a sophisticated restaurant called Barry's on the beach, and it featured those prawns with jam on them.
What were they? Coconut and plum jam. All over
coconut prawns. We thought that was amazing, but it wasn't like it was now. We used to be able to stay on the main street, the main drag, where these very expensive places are now, looking out over Laguna Bay, and it was a dilapidated old place with fake green grass and.
AstroTurf was always wet, and it went when you walk. And you cooked your own food on a barbecue, and it was just beautiful.
But the place was beautiful, still is. And one good thing about Noosa, it has developed, but it hasn't developed crazily like the Gold Coast or anything like that. I think we've had good councils that have stopped the worst aspects of overdevelopment.
Yes, we're very proud of the council.
Everyone who lives here, they've got a favourite spot, a favourite beach or a favourite walk. Is there a favourite spot for you guys?
The walking in the national park. And now there's a beautiful walk, the boardwalk that's been remade all the way from Noosa to the national park. Is just blissful.
Oh, you're not telling the truth. Your favourite place in Noosa is on a sunny day sitting down at Sales for lunch.
Yes,
and looking down along the beach, and that was the site that we decided as we were coming here.
Well, that's birthdays and special
we'd be
treats.
coming here for holidays, but then one day we sat down at this lovely restaurant looking out over the Laguna Bay and thought, well, we're both riders.
Why don't we come here?
And we've got rid of all our kids now.
We haven't. They're all still there. We can't go yet.
Yeah.
But
it
took us 20 years to get
Why
here.
don't we live in the place that we love here?
Someone had shouted us a trip up to open something, a library or something, and from Melbourne, and that's when we were sitting at Sales. We said, one day let's come here and let's hope it's not too long. It did take 20 or so years.
No. That day was when Sales had just opened in 1994.
Right.
We were up here by 1996.
Gosh, were we?
Yes, your memory betrays you, my dear.
Okay, sorry.
But we had been coming to Noosa for 20 years, yes.
I'm
But
sure
that was the
of
defining moment. Oh, this is too good not to live here.
So then you said, all right, let's sell the house and leave all the poor children. And I had to stay
Kick them out, I said. Get rid of
down there.
Little parasites, yeah.
I had to get Rory through NIDA, and it was sad. You know, he hadn't even got into NIDA.
Yes.
And he was.
But I knew they were tough, sturdy kids who could look after themselves.
Selfish old thing, weren't you?
No.
What would you say to young people who are looking to get into the arts in Australia?
Don't do it.
Get into real estate.
Yeah.
No.
Look, the arts is the most precarious profession in the world. It's got the highest unemployment rate, the lowest average wages. People go into the arts because they love it, not because they're going to make a fortune out of it. I was particularly lucky because I was able to make a living out of it, but it doesn't happen often. And it's a tough profession. But if you feel inclined, you'll go into it whether or not there's a lot of money involved. People do it for the love of it, and that's why it's so easy to exploit them. Because they'll work for almost nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have something to fall back on, as your father used to say. I was always writing, but I didn't think I could afford to be a writer until I was much older. So I taught in schools and lectured for 13 years in drama and theatre, and then became a journalist for 8 years, and then I finally got to write books much later when all the children were growing up. So sometimes, you just have to stagger the need to be an artist a little bit.
I went to a conference in Canada once, and people were banging on about how do we encourage more creativity, and finally one writer got up and said, for God's sake, the world is overloaded with creativity. We don't need to encourage more. There'll be no one to drive the buses.
Plumber.
And it's true. If you look at television, you're just bewildered by choice, and a lot of it's high quality choice now. All the streaming channels are offering. There's no shortage of creativity, I advise a few of those young filmmakers out there to become bus drivers because...
Or plumbers. I used to say, wish we had one in our family who could be a plumber. And our daughter looked as if she would not be a plumber but an accountant because she had a good maths brain. And then she's an actor's agent, and then she marries an actor, and so it goes.
No, we're secretly proud of the creativity in our family.
Of course we are.
But it's not an easy road.
And if you weren't writers or creatives in another universe, what occupation could you see yourself doing?
Well, I was well on my way of becoming a psychology academic. I did engineering first and then went back and did an MA prelim in psychology, and I was starting to do postgraduate work there when the writing took off. I think I would have been quite happy as a research psychologist working out what makes human beings tick, which is the same thing I'm doing as a writer.
Yeah,
you like journalism. You loved your journalism.
Well, yes,
though,
I
didn't
did. I loved journalism. I loved teaching until I was exhausted. So, I think, I'd probably done all the things I wanted to do.
When you were a chef once with Stephanie.
Oh yeah, I was a chef. I can't believe a waitress. I was a good waitress.
Who's the famous chef?
Stephanie Alexander
Yeah.
and I started up together. Well, it was her show. She had a little restaurant and I was the waitress and the artistic person who decorated the windows with vegetable animals and stuff like that, which I'd been inspired by in Rome. And oh, I know what. I forgot. When I was a student in Italy at the University of Florence, I wanted to be a restorer of paintings, restoration. And I actually went and had an interview and they thought I might be apprenticed as a restoration person in the academia, which would have been a pretty different sort of job.
Yes, I'm not sure you would have been happy.
Indoors.
Although seeing you at work on the family albums for hours and hours, keeping the family history together, it's,
Historian.
Yeah.
David and Kristin, Mum and Dad, thank you for having a chat with us today.
Great
a lot.
Pleasure.